The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it.
So far, the vast majority of populations are no more willing to face reality than the criminally insane power structures that currently run the planet. The carefully calculated and choreographed cover-up of climate engineering, though it is blatantly in plain sight, continues. The human race has decimated our formerly thriving planet in the geologic blink of an eye. The majority of industrialized populations still believe that the loot, plunder, pillage and pollute paradigm will magically continue into the future. This same majority of the population are considered to be sane by societal standards. But the reality is this: such willful blindness toward immediate and existential threats, like the imploding biosphere, can only be considered a form of collective insanity. Even many who are awake to what is unfolding seem to feel no sense of responsibility to do their part to alter the current course. Like the power brokers, the vast majority seem to be willing to sacrifice the entire web of life in order to keep the status quo reality for slightly longer. Yes, this is truly a form of collective insanity. This is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org. This is a commercial-free news program brought to you by GeoEngineeringWatch.org and is broadcast throughout Northern California on 1670 AM, 104.9 FM, and 105.7 FM. Saturday mornings from 6 to 7, Sunday mornings from 7 to 8 throughout Northern California. It's also broadcast on the East Coast Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time on the PRN Radio Network. Few quick announcements, then loads of very, very dire headlines this week. It's getting more dire by the day. I know this news is not easy to face head on, but we must face it head on if we're to have any chance whatsoever. Not just face the news, but do our part to expose it and do our part to correct the course that the human race is on. Each of us has a part in this play. It's up to us to face it, accept it, embrace it, do what we can. Few quick announcements, and I'll get to those headlines. Orchard Nutrition, as always, for those who want to know more about how to make a difference for the better, there are materials there that are free if you simply commit to helping us to share that data with others. Gem Fair, GEMFAIRE, Gem Fair Event Group, their event this week, big event, Costa Mesa, California. Started yesterday and goes through tomorrow at the Orange County Fair and Event Center. If you're anywhere near that area, show up, show your support, go to the GeoEngineeringWatch.org informational booth and get free materials there. These are being made available to try to help sound the alarm while there's still enough time to make any difference. And those who don't believe that we're in an extremely critical period of unimaginable change, you will believe it soon. Wait and see, and you can quote me on that. Next weekend, Santa Barbara, California, Gem Fair event at the Earl Warren Showgrounds, December 8th through December 10th. Again, you can look up more details at the Gem Fair homepage. Staunch ally in the fight to expose and halt climate engineering. Our deepest gratitude to the Gem Fair organizers and staff. Legal update on the anti-geoengineering legal effort. Legal action is still progressing in Canada. Very, very slow process. We have important cross-examinations of government officials after the first of the year. Painfully slow process. We're doing everything we can there. A lot of organization behind the scenes, and many activists don't seem to realize that. They think you can just walk into a court of law and somehow bring this issue to the light of day without being kicked out of court, and that is not the way it works. A great deal of effort behind the scenes, ongoing now for several years. Our anti-geoengineering legal team has filed a legal action against the U.S. Department of Commerce, as I announced in a previous program, because that's the overlying agency for NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, who is not giving us our Freedom of Information Act requests, and many more of those Freedom of Information Act requests are going out. And this is important to consider while we're preparing for additional legal filings in the U.S. that all of this is ultimately about reaching a critical mass of public awareness, at which time many wheels will begin to turn on their own when people realize they are going down on the ship with the rest of us. All of us are on this ship, and it is sinking by the day. So it comes down to each of us everywhere doing our part to effectively and efficiently sound the alarm. So don't sit on the bench and wait for this legal action to progress. Do your part now, which will help us with the legal effort by raising public awareness, which helps other wheels to turn. Do your part. Don't stand by. Don't sit on the bench. Don't do nothing. All of us are in a position to do something. None of us are in a position to do nothing. We're all a part of this effort. Now, regarding the systematic poisoning of the human race and the entire web of life, we now have another science study that all should consider the ramifications of. Consider this deeply. Here's the study. Record levels of aluminum found in autistic children's brain tissue. No surprise at all. While the aluminum industry denies the connection, we have now additional science proof. New study indicates that widespread exposure to aluminum is setting the stage for catastrophic neurological damage. This report from ScienceDirect.com, also authored by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the World Mercury Project. From this report, listen carefully for all of those who want to toe the official narrative and pretend that vaccinations are proven safe, which is an absolute blatant glaring lie. All those who want to pretend that what they see above their heads in the sky, the climate engineering aircraft spraying toxic heavy metals and chemicals over our heads, we all get to breathe that. If you're part of the population that's pretending none of this is happening, wake up. Wake up. Don't be a part of the problem. Become a part of the solution. Listen to this report carefully. Scientists have been aware of aluminum's neurotoxicity for decades, although aluminum's apologists have tried to shroud the metal's risks in manufactured controversy. A growing number of reports by researchers in the United Kingdom, France, Canada, Israel, and the U.S., and elsewhere have furnished substantive evidence linking aluminum to neuropathy, including the epidemics of Alzheimer's disease and autism spectrum disorder. Dr. Christopher Exley, one of the world's leading experts on aluminum toxicity, has shown that chronic intoxication with myriad forms of this ubiquitous and omnipresent metal is exacting a high price on human health. Not just human health, but the entire web of life. Why is it so omnipresent? The single greatest form of exposure, in addition to vaccinations, is the fact that it's raining down through our air column. For the record, the stated goal of the internationally most recognized climate engineers is to put 20 million tons of aluminum nanoparticulates, the most lethal form, the smaller the particle, the more lethal it is, into our air column annually, 20 million tons. Keep that in mind as I continue on this report. Dr. Exley and other aluminum experts have confirmed that aluminum readily and actively traverses the blood-brain barrier to selectively accumulate in the brain tissues where it induces unwelcome changes in brain biochemistry. As Dr. Exley has noted, there are, quote, no normal levels of brain aluminum, meaning that its presence in brain tissue at any level could be construed as abnormal. Any level, no safe level of aluminum. Consider that. Continuing from this report, documenting aluminum in the ASD brain, autism spectrum disorder brain. In light of the fact that even minute amounts of aluminum can have adverse neurological consequences, Dr. Exley's newest paper, which reports on the first ever study of aluminum in autism spectrum disorder brain tissue, is groundbreaking. Published in the Journal of Trace Elements in Medicine and Biology, the paper documents some of the highest values for aluminum in brain tissue ever recorded. Keep in mind, it's accumulating in all of us, every single one of us, every single human test subject we have seen test results for, hair, blood, or urine, packed with this toxic heavy metal. Primary element in climate engineering patents, which we're seeing going on over our heads every single day, the milky white, silvery white skies laced with trails. You can tell yourself whatever you want. You can tell yourself it's condensation, follow the official narrative, ignoring your sense of reason that we have some days with nothing in our skies and other days with virtual grid patterns. Don't ignore your sense of reason. This threat is real and immediate. Continuing from the report, what the research team found was startling. The study's quantitative arm documented, quote, consistently high aluminum levels representing, quote, some of the highest values for brain aluminum content ever measured, as stated earlier. The study's results reveal that aluminum is entering the brain in autism spectrum disorder patients, again, also with Alzheimer's patients, dementia patients, and a long list of other human ailments, all associated with aluminum. Aluminum is entering the brain via cells that have become loaded with aluminum in the periphery. Where is the aluminum coming from? Question mark in the report. This report does not reference climate engineering, unfortunately, but let's look at vaccinations for the moment. One of the most pervasive routes of modern-day exposure to neurotoxic aluminum is via aluminum adjuvants, additives, in vaccines. Vaccine manufacturers use aluminum in adjuvants to intensify the vaccine recipient's immune response. To be clear, it's not just autism that's directly connected to aluminum exposure. The list of human diseases, again, directly related to aluminum is far too long to cover in this program. Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, those are 3. And we now routinely see TV commercials to address these ailments as if it's just a normal part of life, as if this is something we should all expect to encounter. Normalizing this, making the population accept it. And where else is aluminum coming from? It's descending down through the atmosphere because of the climate engineering fallout. And again, lab tests from around the globe prove that all of us are inhaling aluminum particles with every breath we take. The military-industrial central banker complex has put our planet and the entire web of life under siege in a grand experiment from which there is no return. Without our knowledge or consent, they have initiated this, amongst other programs of total insanity. Here are more headlines on this theme. And why is the U.S. population and other first world populations, why are they so apathetically silent about their own government and military spraying highly toxic elements and vaccinating them with highly toxic elements? As in the case of climate engineering, as part of the illegal climate engineering operations. And consider that if Iran or North Korea was carrying out such operations over our heads, populations would be rioting in the streets. But since our own government is behind this insanity, the majority of the population tries to convince themselves it isn't happening. Again, milky white skies, all too often laced with very visible jet aircraft sprayed aerosol dispersions, and still populations accept the official denial of what they can see with their own eyes above them in the case of climate engineering. And in the case of vaccinations, they accept the official lie that vaccinations are proven safe, which could not be further from the truth. So now we have study after study after study, African children being vaccinated, recent study, proving that they are 500%, 5 times more likely to die in the first 5 months if they've been vaccinated. Vax kids with allergies, 3,000% higher than the unvaxxed kids. Study after study after study, and yet we have a population that refuses to face reality. So remember, as I get to headlines, many dire headlines, it's not just the clinically insane power structure that's the problem. It's the so far hopelessly apathetic populations that refuse to face reality. This is a multifaceted problem. If the populations don't wake up, we have no chance. Here's headlines. This is in an article from Information Clearinghouse. Back to the military-industrial complex. What else are they doing in other parts of the world? Here's the headline. Horror in Yemen. War, famine, drought. 1 million with cholera and now diphtheria, while key ports for humanitarian shipments remain closed. And who's waging the war in Yemen? U.S. ally Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, who beheads political dissenters. Saudi Arabia, who was appointed to the UN Human Rights Council as the head of that council. Total Orwellian world we live in. I'll get to more of the Orwellian parts later in this broadcast. And let's remember the current administration's appointees to key environmental posts. Industrial lobbyists, basically, is who is being appointed so that the planet can be looted, plundered, pillaged until there's nothing left. That's what's happening. And that's how we're going to, quote, make America great again until there's nothing left of our planet. Another headline, U.S. provides, listen to this very carefully, because we just mentioned Saudi Arabia here and what they're doing in Yemen, virtual genocide in Yemen, backed by the U.S., backed by the UK. Here's another headline to go with that. U.S. provides military aid to more than 70% of world's dictatorships. This is from multiple sources. About 3/4 of the world's dictatorships currently receive military assistance, like Saudi Arabia, from the United States. This is a strange record for a nation that consistently justifies or tries to justify its sweeping foreign interventions as aimed at, quote, promoting democracy and, quote, thwarting evil dictatorships while supporting them at the same time. Current analysis shows that the U.S. military is assisting dictators the world over, calling it, quote, promoting democracy, and disingenuously wondering why it's all going so badly. Final paragraph from this report. Ultimately, quote, democracy promotion was never the true intent, as I've stated in how many programs, but instead to disguise and mask the imperial conquest, empire, stated that countless times, empire of nations, the imperial conquest, rather, of nations that refused to acquiesce to the U.S. government demands. Democracy at the point of a gun in order to extract the resources the empire needs, the military juggernaut of insanity, military-industrial juggernaut of insanity. And that's what our country is at this point. For that reason, the notable military interventions of recent decades, particularly Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya, were sold to the U.S. public as being born out of, quote, the need to restore democracy and wrest control from the, quote, evil dictators. That narrative continues to be used to justify pushes for regime change abroad, even though the U.S. self-image as the world's greatest democracy is in tatters, absolute tatters. The rest of the world sees us increasingly for what we are, what our country is. And if the population stands by and whether actively or passively helps it to happen, they're a part of the problem. It's not just those in power. It's time everyone look in the mirror. They couldn't do what they do if they weren't supported by legions of order followers, especially in the U.S. military, just carrying out their orders. That's not okay. It's not patriotic. It's not moral. It's not honorable. And soon the ultimate price will be paid by all of us, by a planet that no longer supports life. For the record, greatest employer on the planet, U.S. military. Greatest polluter, greatest single source polluter on the planet, U.S. military. Greatest single source fossil fuel resource consumer, U.S. military. Something to think about. More headlines. Headlines of deception. This is from multiple sources. Homes should not be abandoned after a big nuclear accident. Now, what kind of absurd Orwellian statement is that? Listen to this. New research suggests that few people, if any, should be asked to leave their homes after a big nuclear accident, which is just what happened in March 2011 following the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster. I'm trying to give an example of the sort of disinformation that's put out and that much of the population accepts because they don't want to face reality. This is the main finding of a multi-university research study, universities bought, sold, and paid for by the power structure, led by Philip Thomas, professor of risk management at the University of Bristol, involving the universities Manchester and Warwick, the Open University and City University of London. Okay, the results are published in a special issue of Process Safety and Environmental Protection, a journal from the Institute of Chemical Engineers. What a surprise. The foxes who run the hen house putting out the reports that everything's fine. And if you have a nuclear accident next door, you should just stay there because it's all fine. Nothing to worry about. Total Orwellian world we live in. That vaccinations filled with toxic heavy metal neurotoxins are safe, which they are not. That climate engineering we can clearly see going on over our heads is not really happening. And that if you have a nuclear accident, a nuclear meltdown next door, in the case of Fukushima, a triple nuclear meltdown with no technology to fix it, no end in sight, it's all fine. Just stay home and don't worry about it. Another headline. Multiple sources on this too. Fukushima scientists. Days of eating fish from the ocean are over. Scientists say there's no safe level of radiation. Of course there's no safe level of radiation. Unlike what our authorities would tell us, there's no safe level. Radiation from the Fukushima power plant has been continually leaking since the meltdown at a catastrophic level. Scientists are claiming days of eating fish from the Pacific Ocean are over. Scientists have claimed that TEPCO, the company who is in charge of monitoring the plant, has admitted radiation has been leaking into the Pacific Ocean non-stop for the past 6 years. And what were we told initially? Everything was fine, weren't we? We were told everything was fine. And when we, as I've stated in previous programs, when our government talks about the supposed crimes of Russia exposing the crimes of Hillary Clinton as some sort of egregious act, And we had, again, another reminder, the Stuxnet virus from the US and Israel thought responsible for the safety measures at Fukushima not working. What kind of cyber terrorism is that? Now we have an extinction, potential extinction event if other factors don't cause the extinction first because of what our country and Israel did. Cyber terrorism, shutting down safety measures at Fukushima, which was the real underlying cause for the totality of this disaster, in addition to other factors that may be related to the quake itself as being a part of environmental modification weapons. But we have now scientists telling us it's okay to stay in your home even if you're next door to a nuclear accident, even though the fish in the entire ocean are not safe to eat. Let's press on. Fukushima Darkness Part 2. This is by Robert Hunziker report. Also, I just want to add to the extent of the meltdown. The impact of Fukushima Daiichi's nuclear meltdown extends far and wide as the hemispheric ecosystem gets hit by thousands of tons of radioactive water. Additionally, serendipitousness surrounds untold death and illness, yet it remains one of the least understood and most deceitfully reported episodes in journalism modern history, along with the climate engineering cover-up. It's imperative the population understand this. We have been lied to about countless near-term existential threats that are closing in on us from every side. We've been lied to about the true state of climate disintegration and the geoengineering reality. And again, as I've stated so many times in the past, you can't have a legitimate discussion about the climate without discussing climate engineering. Can't have a legitimate discussion about climate engineering without discussing the chemical ice nucleation, patented chemical ice nucleation for weather modification processes, and the toxic engineered cool downs those processes help to create if there's enough moisture present. So how are the power structure keeping the populations pacified? A quick reminder on the complete facade of the stock market and the lie of economic growth. Pacify the population, make them think everything's okay. The environment has historically provided 75% of global GDP, directly or indirectly, for free, no more. The biosphere is spiraling toward total collapse. So why is the U.S. stock market at record highs? How could it be possible that the economy could be growing and such value could be increasing as the biosphere implodes? The reality is this: there is no increased value. It's all smoke and mirrors. The stock market is a house of cards, an illusion designed to, again, pacify populations and thus blind them to the unfolding reality until the brutal, bitter end. What's our scheduled weather in the continental U.S.? The bought and paid for script reading so-called weather forecasters are telling us a weather whiplash engineered cool down is coming for the eastern half of the U.S., while the U.S. West will now again flip back to potential record high temperatures under yet another ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure ridge that has now become so common in the West. The power structure paid actors in the climate science community have labeled it, quote, the ridiculously resilient ridge. The climate engineers are simply playing weather whack-a-mole at this point. The planet's climate and life support systems are unraveling at blinding speed with illegal, destructive, and deadly climate intervention programs helping to fuel the overall fire. Short-term, highly toxic cooldowns, again, at the cost of an even worse overall warming. Yes, warming. The planet's not just warming. We would be lucky if we faced just global warming. We are already free-falling into an abrupt climate shift. This is a mathematical fact, and I'm profoundly perplexed that we still see people trying to push the we're entering an ice age narrative of total discrediting insanity. Even people in the anti-geoengineering movement, I still see this sometimes. Exactly the narrative the climate engineers want. Why do we think they engineered these short-term cool downs, creating a cold, dense layer of air in the ground while we have nothing but above normal temperatures at altitude? Nothing but. I communicate with pilots, and this is absolutely the case. From all of them, I hear the same. Far above normal temperatures at altitude. Nothing else. No below normal, only above normal, which further confirms what we have always stated at geoengineeringwatch.org. When there's enough moisture present and chemical ice nucleation processes are conducted over that moisture, creating a short-term surface cool down, perhaps a few hundred feet thick of cool air, creating the illusion of cold on a planet that's in total, absolute meltdown. Why is it important we have this narrative correct? So that we are credible, so that we can have some chance of allying with the so far cowardly climate science community that is refusing to tell the truth, and they are in danger. I understand that with a federal gag order on them, on now National Weather Service and NOAA employees. They are in danger, and we've had enough climate scientists die mysteriously as we have the anti-vaccination physicians die mysteriously. I understand the threat is real, but I would say this to both communities, the medical community, those who know the truth and are refusing to tell it, and those in the climate science community who know the truth about climate engineering and are refusing to tell it. Your silence won't save you as the planet and its life support systems implode. Your silence won't save you, won't save anyone. Whatever the risk, if you're in one of those two communities, wouldn't you rather take your last breath knowing that you tried instead of sitting silently on the bench and doing nothing while everything was at stake? And if you are in one of those two communities and you have information that will help us, if you can reach us at geoengineeringwatch.org, our lead attorney is a part of a firm that specializes in representing whistleblowers. We just need to hear from you. And we have even a USPS mailing address that can be used if you're understandably concerned about internet monitoring. But reach out, do something. Don't do nothing. None of us are in a position to do nothing, especially those experts in the fields I've just discussed who know what's happening and are refusing to stand up. And for those experts in those fields also, don't stand up alone. Collaborate with your associates who know this is happening and stand up together with many of them at once. Safety in numbers, but do it soon because time is absolutely not on our side. More headlines from NPR, another major disinformation site in many ways, but now there are things they cannot hide anymore. So we should still look at these sources of data. Climate scientists watch their words, hoping to stave off funding cuts. This is something that, again, they're showing cowardice by being concerned about their funding while the planet's going down. From this report, scientists appear to be self-censoring by omitting the term climate change. Think how absurd that is. Any person on this planet that has any shred of sanity left understands the climate is completely turning upside down. Climate engineering a big part of that equation, but not the only part. But imagine that we now have a government that is forcing them to not even use the term climate change, and we have a public standing by and accepting that. In fact, some of them even cheering that, as if somehow ignoring the problem will make it all magically go away. By omitting the term climate change in public grant summaries, an NPR analysis of grants awarded by the National Science Foundation's a steadily decreasing number with the phrase climate change. In other words, if you put that in your report, you will not get funded. So let's consider if they even mention climate engineering, they wouldn't only lose their funding, they would lose their job or perhaps much more. Who knows what threat they face? But we still need them to stand up. All of us need to stand up. So it reduces their number of funding if the term climate change is in the title or summary, resulting in a sharp drop in the term's use in 2017. A result of the current administration. Not that other administrations were any more honest. They're all criminals. Obama, Clinton, Bush, I say that every week because so many people don't seem to hear it. At the same time, use of alternative terms such as extreme weather appears to be rising. Why? Because that sounds like something natural when it's anything but. There's nothing natural about our weather. In fact, there is no natural weather at this point. The satellite images we are looking at are profoundly shocking. There is nothing natural, and what's going on over our oceans right now is alarming, beyond alarming. It is a complete soup of toxic aerosol spraying and radio frequency interaction. Those in power know that the ship is going down, and at this point they're willing to do or try anything to hide it till the last moment, even at the cost of ensuring that nothing lives. That's how desperate they are, to keep business as usual until the last possible moment. The change in language, back to this report, appears to be driven in part by the Trump administration. No surprise. Trump administration's open hostility to the topic of climate change. President Trump pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord. Again, Paris Climate Accord, a farce, complete smoke and mirrors, simply a means of pacifying the population while climate engineering is ramped up behind the scenes, of which Trump, Obama, Clinton, Bush is the rest, all a part of it. All a part of it. But Trump's in the White House now, so he will be mentioned in some of these reports. Meanwhile, the Environmental Protection Agency has been systematically removing references to climate change from its official website. Both the EPA's leader, Scott Pruitt, and Secretary of Energy, Rick Perry, have said they do not accept the scientific consensus that humans are causing the planet to get warmer. Think about that. Think about how incredibly absurd that is. We have statistical science study that states there is statistically a zero chance that humans are not behind what's happening on the planet. And let's put all that aside. Let's activate our sense of reason for those that have any sense of reason left. How could any rational human being believe that the human race, doing what it's done to the planet in the last 200 years, that it wouldn't have an effect? Putting 100 million tons of CO2 in the atmosphere every single day, climate engineering for 70 years, destroying the ozone layer from climate engineering and other effects, cutting down the forest, paving the planet, poisoning the oceans. What rational person could possibly believe that that wouldn't have an effect? And yet we have top officials stating exactly that. We're living in a circus of insanity now. Not on the horizon, it's here now. As a result, many scientists find themselves in an uncomfortable position. They're caught between environmental advocates looking to recruit allies and right-wing activists. And let's get the left wing in there too, by the way. When we have sources like Amy Goodman, the biggest left news program on the planet, Democracy Now!, not willing to talk about the climate engineering elephant in the room because her funding from the Ford Foundation dictates that she not talk about it. There's more than enough fault on every single side of the fence. It's not a left-right equation. That's all an illusion. In fact, some of the environmental communities are the hardest to reach of all with realities like the climate engineering issue. They are the most in denial of all. So let's keep that in mind. The left-right illusion of some sort of real difference is meaningless. It's just two sides to the same coin. Grants containing the climate change term are down 50% in 2017. No surprise. Another headline, evidence mounts against so-called climate change hiatus. I want everyone to listen to this. This is what I have said at geoengineeringwatch.org the entire time when this story came out several years ago, that the climate had stopped warming. It was an absolute lie based on falsified data, and now we have vindication on this story as well. From this report, evidence is mounting against the so-called climate change hiatus, a period lasting from 1998 to 2012, when global temperatures allegedly stopped rising as sharply as they had before. This misconception can now be explained by missing temperature data from the Arctic, a new study reveals. The bottom line is this: the so-called hiatus never happened. It never happened. It was a method by which the power structure also helped to sell geoengineering as working when it wasn't working. Climate engineering is not mitigation for global warming, and we're still being told by the climate science community that worst case scenario we can utilize climate engineering and somehow buy some time. That's a lie. That card has been played 70 years ago. It is making the problem far worse, not better, in addition to poisoning with the aluminum, as I covered in the early part of this program, in addition to contaminating the entire planet. The climate engineering card has been played. It's done far more harm than any perceived good, no surprise, and we have the entire climate science community pretending that it's not been deployed yet. They need to find their courage, stand up, and tell the truth while it still matters. And in regard to telling the truth, the science terms are imperative. For those who truly are committed to helping in the battle to expose and halt climate engineering, the climate science terms are imperative to use. Headlines from last week to prove my point from Vice News. Chemtrails aren't real. You don't see a science term there, do you? Just the marginalized chemtrails term. No basis for that term. Another headline from New Scientist. Chemtrails conspiracy theory gets put to the ultimate test. You don't see them talking about geoengineering, solar radiation management, stratospheric aerosol injection. For those who insist on using the chemtrails term, just understand, if you're using that to wake others up or dialogue about this issue in any circle other than your own personal friends, you're harming the cause. That's simple. From the Telegraph in UK, chemtrails and other aviation conspiracy theories. You don't see them saying geoengineering as a conspiracy theory, solar radiation management. It's chemtrails. That term harms the credibility of our cause, period. It's a term they want us to use. That's why I posted an interview last week with David Pachman. For those who haven't seen that, go to geoengineeringwatch.org, one of the top stories in recent columns, watch that interview and consider how tenaciously he insisted I use the chemtrails term. Why? Because it harms the credibility of the anti-geoengineering cause. That's why. One more along those lines. This is an older article, My Month with Chemtrails Conspiracy Theorists. This is from The Guardian. So consider that all these headlines always use the chemtrails term. We're playing chess, learn to play it well, effectively. Another headline from multiple sources. Health officials warn many could die as Britain to be hit with 3-week-long Arctic cold. This is absolutely engineered with chemical ice nucleation elements. And for those who die, we won't know if it's from the cold or from the toxic elements in the chemical ice nucleation operations that are part of the climate engineering, climate intervention programs. Another headline, raindrops splash. This is from American Physical Society's Division of Fluid Dynamics. Raindrops splash pathogens onto crops. I'm going to summarize on this report because basically what it means is this. They're trying to blame the rain now for contaminating crops. This is incredibly absurd. Let's blame nature for the rain being toxic. And this is from, again, a very thought-to-be credible source. American Physical Society's Division of Fluid Dynamics. And the population buys this because a few paid-off scientists say it. The science community is one of the single greatest tools of deception that has brought us to this dark place we now find ourselves in. Another headline, analysis shows methane concentration in the atmosphere has more than doubled since 2010. Nighttime low temperatures are rising twice as fast as daytime highs. I've been over this program after program. For those who think CO2 is great, the more the better. And they put methane in the same category because they both do the same thing, except methane is much more powerful. It's not a great thing. The oceans are acidifying, and the blanket of atmosphere that traps heat on the planet is getting thicker, and that means we will get much warmer. Climate engineering shutting the ozone layer, even more thermal energy penetrating, and methane, which is 100 to 120 times more potent than CO2 over a 10-year time horizon, is covering the planet right now like a layer of glass, and climate engineering has made that worse, not better. And let's remember, though climate engineering and its reflective particulates can reflect some of the daytime thermal energy, it traps that energy at night, just like methane, just like CO2. Many factors now trapping more and more heat on our planet, and we will incinerate. I want to get to some more headlines on that to make clear just how severe this incineration will be soon. Another headline, Arctic warming rate higher than previously thought. Over and over since the start of GeoEngineeringWatch.org, I have repeated that. It's not as bad as we're being told. It's far worse than we're being told. More vindication on that. From Fairbanks, Alaska, scientists say the Arctic warmed at a higher rate than previously estimated, refuting the concept of a climate change hiatus between 1998 and 2012. Further confirmation of that. Another headline, Arctic climate change being felt further south, scientists say. This is multiple sources on this as well. An international summary of 5 years' worth of research on Arctic climate change concludes that the top of the world is getting warmer faster than anyone thought. Now, some of us thought it was, didn't we? How many years have, based on data at geoengineeringwatch.org, have I stated this? And now we're having confirmation when it's impossible to hide. Continuing from the report, at least 15 new academic papers add weight to the conclusion that the loss of sea ice is causing changes in the upper atmosphere that disrupt southern temperatures and rainfall. Quote, most people don't understand just how bad it is. They will soon. I've said that over and over. Those who don't want to believe this, want to ram their heads in the sand, that won't save you. Another headline, meteorologist warns collapse of 2 Antarctic glaciers could flood every coastal city on Earth. From that report, 2 of Antarctica's glaciers are holding our civilization hostage. Meteorologist Eric Holthaus wrote in a piece for Grist, Pine Island and Thwaites are among the continent's biggest and fastest melting glaciers, and they could unleash 11 feet of sea level rise if and when they collapse. That's enough to flood every coastal city on our planet. University of Michigan leading ice sheet scientist Jeremy Bassis said, every revision to our understanding has said that ice sheets can change faster than we thought. Exactly what I've said again. It's much worse than we've been told. We didn't predict that Pine Island was going to retreat. We didn't predict that Larsen B was going to disintegrate. We tend to look at these things after they've happened. Underreporting of the severity, much worse than we've been told, over and over. That is what we have tried to sound the alarm about. Perhaps more will listen now. Another headline, China's coast threatened by rapidly rising seas. Sea levels are creeping. This is from multiple sources as well. Sea levels are creeping up as temperatures get hotter here on Earth, and China's State Oceanic Administration just revealed worrying information about its threat to the country's coast. Sea levels in 2016 in China rose 1.3 inches in just 1 year. Another headline, Thanksgiving warm records tumble as San Diego sees temperature soaring to 93 degrees. 93 in San Diego on Thanksgiving. And that's the official reading. Temperatures on the ground were higher. Another headline, running out of time, from Al Jazeera. Australia measures yet another heat wave over and over and over. Australia is starting to superheat. More on that in a moment. Another headline from Think Progress. Monster heat wave reaches Greenland, bringing rain and melting its ice sheet. From that report, temperatures nearly 60 degrees above normal. 60. Think about that. Do our mainstream media sources say a word about this sort of environmental implosion? No, they don't, while they're distracting us with every imaginable drama they can drum up. Continuing from the report, NASA's ocean melting Greenland OMG mission warns the ice sheet is more at risk to global warming than we knew. Again, think of what I just covered about the penalization of any scientists who try to express the true severity of the warning, and certainly any scientists who would dare to talk about climate engineering. They are severely penalized to a degree that we can't fully know. Report finishes with this. It's been unusually warm in the United States in recent days, with records being set across the country, but it's been scorching in Greenland with temperatures as much as 60 degrees above normal, which means above freezing in many places. And this comes on the heels of new research which finds that the enormous ice sheet, Greenland, is far more unstable than previously realized. That's bad news, because the Greenland ice sheet contains enough landlocked ice to raise sea levels by over 20 feet. It's not coming, it's happening. It's happening now. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's happening at blinding speed, and coastal regions are being flooded increasingly. If you don't believe it, take a good look at what's happening in Florida right now and other places all over the world. Lots of information for those who choose to investigate. Another headline from, again, multiple sources on this one as well. Rapid warming and disintegrating polar ice set the stage for societal collapse. This is why the climate engineers are trying to so desperately hide the severity of abrupt climate shift that we're descending into with climate engineering in the attempt to hide it, making it worse. And that's why those in the who claim to be in the anti-climate engineering community, who are pushing the preferred narrative of the power structure that there's no global warming, or that we're entering, even more ridiculously, an ice age. It's absurd. You're helping the power structure to confuse and divide the population, and you're helping to cover the tracks of climate engineering. How exactly does that help in the fight to expose and stop climate engineering? Answer, it doesn't. More headlines. This one from Inside Climate News. On the Outer Banks of North Carolina, officials and property owners battle to keep the ocean at bay. Why? Because it's eroding shorelines. More headlines. I'm running out of time. Another article from Think Progress, which was originally produced from Bloomberg. Climate change poses, quote, nightmare scenario for Florida coast. Just mentioned that a moment ago, didn't I? Bloomberg warns. Now, this next headline, again from multiple sources, is extremely important to understand, to contemplate, and to consider. Here's the headline. If oceans stopped absorbing heat from climate change, life on land would already average 122 degrees Fahrenheit. 122. I want to finish this excerpt from the report, and then I'll comment on this. Since the 1970s, more than 93% of excess heat captured by greenhouse gases has been absorbed by the oceans. To understand how much heat that is, think of it this way. If the oceans weren't absorbing it, average global temperatures on land would already be far higher, around 122 degrees Fahrenheit, according to researchers on the documentary Chasing Coral. The global average surface temperature right now is 59. It's higher than 59. That's the official average. 122 means everything's gone, done, dead. In fact, a tiny fraction of that increase means the same. 122 would, needless to say, would be unlivable. More than 93% of climate change is out of sight and out of mind for most of us land-dwelling humans. But as the oceans continue to onboard all that heat, they're becoming unlivable themselves. More on that in a moment. Scientists worry that warming oceans also risk releasing billions of tons of frozen methane, already happening in the Arctic. I've covered that program after program. From the thawing seabed, unlocking that methane, a powerful greenhouse gas, could trigger significant warming here on land. That's the sort of downplaying of the science community. Could trigger. We're back to the same example. If you shoot yourself in the head, you could have a problem. There's no could about it. There's no could. It's happening. It's here. We're seeing methane counts at atmosphere as high as 3,000 parts per billion. It hasn't been over 700 parts per billion for 1,000,000 years. Methane is covering the planet like a layer of glass right now. This is an existential threat. I want to continue. I'm almost out of time in this 1-hour broadcast. Scientists warn Australian cities could soon be uninhabitable because of extreme heat. Climate scientists from this report have warned that some Australian cities could become virtually uninhabitable due to a combination of blistering heat and smothering humidity. And that story was, by the way, from Meantime in Australia. That's the news source. Salt Lake City hits record high temperatures 2 days in a row. Salt Lake City hit 70 degrees. Official sources said 69, other sources said 70, and that was the nighttime temperature at 3 in the morning. 70 degrees, Salt Lake City in almost December. And again, for the record, that was not a daytime high. That temperature was at almost 3 in the morning, middle of the night, 70 degrees. Moving on, another headline from The Guardian. Further vindication on what we've reported at geoengineeringwatch.org for years. From The Guardian, world on track to lose 2/3 of wild animals by 2020. That's 2.5 years. Major report warns. From that report, the number of wild animals living on Earth is set to fall by 2/3 by 2020, according to a new science report, part of mass extinction that's destroying the natural world upon which humanity depends. No habitat, no humans. Very simple, isn't it? Report continues. The analysis, the most comprehensive to date, indicates that animal populations plummeted by 58% between 1970 and 2012, with losses on track to reach 67%. It's actually worse than this report states. Researchers from the World Wildlife Federation and the Zoological Society of London compiled the report from scientific data and found that the destruction of wild habitats, hunting, and pollution were to blame. No mention of climate engineering in that mix, is there? Climate engineering that is the single greatest assault on the web of life at this time. Greatest threat we face short of nuclear cataclysm, no mention of it. Nothing. The climate engineering elephant in the room continues to rage above our heads. Another headline from the UK, Independent in UK. Sea creatures in deepest parts of ocean found to have plastic fibers in their stomachs. It's not just the heat. It's also the pollution. Massive pollution. Plastic pollution everywhere now found in every organism in the ocean. We have trashed our planet in the geologic blink of an eye. And in regard to the dying oceans, it's not just the pollution, the plastic pollution, it's not just the superheating temperatures, it's not just the toxic farm runoff, it's not just the radiation from Fukushima and other sources, it's everything. It's every form of human activity, climate engineering included, which is destroying the ozone layer, which is killing plankton. It's all the above and more. It's important not to think dichotomously, and many people are still thinking in this or that terms, that it's just Fukushima or it's just something else, or it's everything. It's all forms, and all these forms synergize, making the entire scenario worse. Still, it magnifies, if you will. So consider that from countless directions, the human race is decimating Earth's natural life support processes, and if the oceans die, we die. If the forests die, we die. If the climate system implodes, we die. From countless directions, these converging cataclysms are all coming together at the same time, and we still live in societies that are completely mired in denial, accepting whatever lie the power structure gives to them, whatever lie of pacification to keep them from panicking until the last possible moment. It's time to wake up before there's nothing left to salvage. Now, this next report is about the kelp forests that are disappearing all over the globe. Many have heard and understand that the reefs are dying all over the planet, but the kelp ecosystems are actually a much, much larger and more thriving ecosystem, and they're dying everywhere. And this is particularly distressing to me because I've had the great honor and pleasure of diving in many places on the world. I've been diving since I was 14 years old. I've spent so many hours, hundreds and hundreds of hours in kelp forests alone. That's not a recommended practice for divers who are certified to know this, and I'm a certified dive master and have been for a long time. I was certified when I was 14. But only by diving alone can you see certain things, and I've had no other recourse but to dive alone. I've spent hundreds of hours in kelp forests, and to know that they are perishing is far beyond heartbreaking for me. And it makes me infuriated, as it should make us all infuriated, to fight on, to salvage what's left. Not to sit down and pretend we can't do anything, but to fight on, because there is still part of the web of life left, and it deserves every bit of effort and energy we can put toward the fight to salvage that. Here are some excerpts from this report. Temperatures have risen nearly 3 degrees Fahrenheit in recent decades, and this is all it took to doom the once luxuriant giant kelp forests of eastern Australia and Tasmania. Thick canopies that once covered much of the region's coastal sea surface have wilted in intolerably warm and nutrient-poor water. Then a warm water sea urchin species moved in. Voracious grazers, the invaders have mowed down much of the remaining vegetation over vast areas and have formed what scientists call urchin barrens, bleak marine environments largely devoid of life. It's a desert. It's a virtual desert. The last time I was in the Channel Islands, regions that were covered with large kelp forests were now simply barren rocks covered with urchins, deserts. Many factors killing the oceans, and it's not just Fukushima, it's not just the depleted uranium that our military is using for practice off the U.S. West Coast, it's not just the heating, it's everything. But the heating of the ocean is the single biggest factor here. Consider again, as the kelp forests die, massive ecosystems are being lost. Reefs have already died. This report's long, and I encourage anybody to try to look it up and read through it, because the kelp is dying everywhere. Off the U.S. West Coast, Alaska, Australia, Tasmania, and we're not hearing a word about it. No, we're seeing Roy Moore and Al Franken and their improprieties and other drummed-up dramas from the mainstream media weapon of mass deception and distraction. And a final report, and I need to finish this off with some instruction as to what we can do to make a difference. As the planet implodes, one last report, one last headline from ABC News to show the human mentality, even at this late hour. German court states ancient forests can be cleared for coal mine. Wonderful. Let's just loot, plunder, and pillage. From this report, a court in Western Germany says an ancient forest near the Belgian border can be chopped down to make way for a coal strip mine. Just happened. Just want to give that final example as a testimony to the current collective insanity that I spoke about in the beginning of this program. So how do we make a difference? How do we change course? Understand this. There is no silver bullet. There's no magic solution. There's no easy way forward. And I get so many messages sent to me from individuals that are understandably angry at the climate engineering insanity and other factors, but instead of taking the time to investigate the situation and investigate how they themselves can actually help with the desperately needed grassroots awareness-raising efforts so that we can reach a critical mass of awareness. Instead of doing this, many people seem more intent on lashing out at those who are fully committed to the effort of exposing and halting climate engineering and other atrocities. They're angry for those who are already in the fight not providing them, who are doing nothing, with the magical solution that they want for stopping climate engineering and other atrocities like vaccinations. And my advice to such individuals who throw criticism out but who aren't actually doing anything themselves and aren't actually accepting the fact that there is no easy way forward, my advice to them is this: join us in the battle to actually help, to actually do something constructive, starting with facing the fact that, again, there is no easy way forward. Another point is this: many are not taking the time to investigate the credibility of the information they share and forward to others, and thus they're sharing non-credible data that's completely counterproductive to the cause. And just because an article is posted on a subject does not make it an article that's factual. If you're going to take a long and perilous voyage over the ocean, would you just jump on the first boat you saw with no inspection whatsoever of its seaworthiness? No. If you want to help the cause, share credible data with verifiable facts from a credible source. Check the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for the most hard-hitting fact and photo data available. There are even free downloadable files for this data so that anyone can print it locally. Every single one of us are needed in the battle to expose and stop the insanity, in the battle to salvage what's yet left of Earth's life support systems. If we're to have any chance of even near-term survival, we must all commit to effectively and efficiently being a part of the solution. This does not include sitting on the bench with the false belief that someone somewhere will carry the fight forward so that we don't have to do anything. This is a fool's notion and will only further the current trajectory of certain near-term planetary omnicide. Make your voice heard while you can. No one is helpless. No one is powerless in this equation. Join the epic battle to sound the alarm. Reaching a critical mass of awareness is the only way forward. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org.